Louise Bedford here, your host of the Talking Trading podcast. This is how traders excel. This week, Chris, Tate and I are going to talk about some of the myths and fallacies involved in the share market. There are so many misconceptions and so many things you have to be aware of in order to trade effectively, because if you don't become aware of these things, you can waste tens of years staggering around in the wilderness. Now, Chris, some of the myths and conceptions that you have heard would have just made his hair curl, I'm sure. So what
back in the day.
Back in the day.
When the world was in black and white.
Now, for those of you watching on our YouTube /trading game channel, you will see that we have created some clever little signs which are overrated and underrated. Chris, Tate and I have done nothing to prepare each other for this particular episode because we didn't want to give each other our answers like you don't want to cheat in a test. So I'm going to name particular topics that people always get wrong in terms of whether they should put emphasis on this particular item. And then Chris and I are going to discuss those topics as well as discover whether we think they're overrated or underrated. Now, for a little bit of added spice, a lot of you know that we have been running our mentor program for the last 24 years. This coming year is going to be our 25th year of running our repeat for free 6-month mentor program. We teach you how to trade every instrument over every time frame where it is your own trading plan, and we keep working for you for free as you hit your goals. That repeat for free aspect is so important. So Chris, if you just loved the last 24 years working with me as mentors in the mentor program.
Are we going to edit this?
Maybe that is overrated, but we don't know yet because we're not using the signs. So for those of you who know about the mentor program, you will know that in order to get involved with the mentor program, there is a lot of stiff competition. You need to be on our priority notification list in order to get a look in when we open for bookings at the start of November. And the way to do that is to go to tradinggame.com.au/priority and register your details. And we are releasing a free mini masterclass about all of the things you need to do in order to improve your trading. And we'll release that to everybody on priority notification. So the thing is with that is this Talking Trading episode is going to cover the first few misconceptions and perhaps things that you're doing wrong in the markets that you think you need to actually address. And our priority notification list is going to get the remainder of those particular flaws. So I know you're going to love it. Let's start with the first one. So number one is trading every market. So by trading every market, a lot of people spread themselves very thin, but some do extremely well with trading every market. So Chris, let's see whether you think trading every market is overrated or underrated. Let's hold up our sign. We match. So for those of you only listening to the Talking Trading audio, we both held up overrated. Chris, tell us about trading every market.
I think, let me start with a quote, and it's a quote from history. Frederick the Great once said that if you defend everything, you end up defending nothing. The same applies to trading. If you trade everything, you end up trading nothing. One of the issues we have, and I was listening to an ad on the radio on the way in here, and it was about the CommBank app for CommSec, their little phone app thingy. And it said, with a touch of a button, you can access 13 international markets. Given that there's only 2 markets in the world that you can actually really trade properly, and that is your own domestic market here, the ASX, and the US, you can't trade most of the markets effectively that people talk about. And this is one of the problems. Once you start to spread yourself too thin, you ignore the fact that for all businesses, it doesn't matter what the business is, the riches are in the niche. That's where the money's made. And part of the problem with accessing so many markets is we come back to the old problem. Most people trade for entertainment. If you can wake up at 3 a.m. and go, look, I'm going to go long herrings in Norway, that'll be interesting. Yeah, that's fun, but really, who cares?
I think also it's a matter of decision fatigue. One of the things, if you spread yourself too thin and you are having to make a lot of different decisions, you'll find the initial decisions that match your chronology, i.e. when you are awake in the morning or whether you are more of an evening person. If you're matching your chronology, your owl methods are matching when you're actually making decisions in the market, or your lark methods are early morning and you're doing really well with that, you're thriving, then your decisions will be fresh and new and lovely. However, as time ticks on and you move into your non-chronological state, this is where you start to make errors. And we see that all the time. So let's have a look at number 2. Number 2 is financial freedom. Do we think this is overrated or underrated? We're holding up underrated. Chris, why do you think financial freedom is underrated?
How are you going to edit this?
I wasn't planning to.
Oh, you can do a little bit, can't you? Yeah, you can. Bleep this. There is a thing in the world known as off money. You won't actually get that without any form of financial planning, thought, guidance, whatever, that has relevance for you. You can't simply shotgun the world and hope for the best. You've actually got to sit down and think. And I've used that word, haven't I? Not the one before, think. Because the word think is problematic for people because it means taking responsibility.
I think with financial freedom, the word itself is overrated. We see it splashed around. It is one of those things that has become almost an advertising acronym, and it is something that I think you have to answer for yourself. So as an individual, you have to work out what financial freedom means for you. Does it mean saying no to your boss? Does it mean being able to take the kids overseas at a whim? Does it mean paying for your grandchildren's education? Now, depending on what you think of as a legacy, it will very much depend on your objectives as a trader and the types of markets and timeframes that you trade and how you define yourself. Personally, I prefer the term financial serenity because that lets you relax into the process and you don't have to end up running rings around yourself thinking I have to do everything because I have to maintain my lifestyle. So there are aspects here that I think are interesting. You have to work out for yourself what your own objectives are so that you can fulfill them.
But I think it ties back neatly to the first overrated and underrated, trading every market. People think they misunderstand what freedom is, and they think if they substitute one job for a trading job, that's freedom. No, you've just simply swapped one job for a job that can be really quite taxing and very, very difficult at times.
It's very true. Let's move on to number 3, which is technical analysis. Chris, is it overrated or underrated? Ooh, so I have popped up underrated and Chris Tate has put up overrated. Now, argue your point, my friend.
Oh, that's easy. I think what happens with technical analysis is people move into the arena of magic. And this is the issue. They forget it is a fundamental practical skill. And all of a sudden it takes on these magical connotations that you can predict the future. You count waves in a trend, you look at the stars, you do all this parabolic stuff, and you lose sight of how simple it is. And so people move from very, very simple ideas that work. They get confronted by people who go, I can predict the future. That's good. Why do you still live at home with your mother at 47 if you can do that? True story. I had someone, remember, at the ATAA, that bloke confronted us out on the way out saying, I predicted exactly where the S&P 500 will go to as he got into his $1,500 car. And I think that's the problem. It becomes overrated as a thing. People think it's the be-all and end-all.
So my justification for it being underrated is that a lot of people coming from a credit information background, coming from a financial services background, the way that I used to be when I had a real job, a lot of people don't realise that people need to put their money where their mouth is in order to display their efforts onto a share chart. They think a PE ratio will be all they need to make a decision. They think a profit and loss will be all they need. I've been interviewed on quite a few different podcasts where they come from that more fundamental perspective. So fundamental analysis is where we analyse things like profit and loss and PE ratios, and technical analysis is where we're looking at price and volume action. So I think if you are going to use fundamental analysis, you'd better make sure that the market believes those same things that you do about those figures that you're looking at.
Yeah. Does the market tell the same story as the story you've concocted in your head? 9 times out of 10 it won't.
Yes. That is why I put underrated, because I think a lot of people need to look at technical analysis as being a viable choice in terms of how they analyse the markets. Now, number 4 is the Australian options market. What are we going to go with? We've both gone with overrated.
And that's only because I didn't have a sign for rooted.
Tell us about the Australian options market.
Back in the day, when I began trading, the options market was a very vibrant, very energetic place. There were a handful of stocks listed. We also had the advantage of having market makers on the floor. Many people think that the move to computerised trading is a step ahead. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. The reason it was a step backwards for the Australian options market was simply that options are negotiated by individuals. So if I had a series of orders to place on the floor, the market maker would take my orders, approach a series, our broker operator would approach a series of market makers and say, I need to get this done for this aggregate price. And they would go, yeah, look, we can probably do that plus or minus 1. And you'd go, sweet, we're done. A few days later, the same market makers would approach us and say, look, I need to do these for this aggregate price. And you go, yeah, we can probably do that plus or minus 1. We're good to go. And so this was the mechanism by which you transacted business. Nowadays, that's completely gone. There are too many stocks. There's no interpersonal relationships. It's very difficult to get set. And in this move to try and boost liquidity and make things look better, we've had the number of shares covered per contract reduced from 1,000 to 100. And we've now got hundreds of dog stocks. Well, I won't say hundreds. Well, it's over 100, so it's hundreds. That shouldn't even be listed, probably shouldn't be listed on the ASX, let alone on the AOM. So
I think the Australian options market, having both of us had books that are bestsellers on the Australian options market, it's funny, isn't it? Because you're hearing best-selling authors bag something that we've written about. The Australian options market has been fantastic in some ways. For people who got started with trading options way back when, there was definitely money there. And there is one method that I still use in the Australian options market in terms of pyramiding, which I'll describe in just a moment. However, the liquidity has dried up, which means that things are very difficult in terms of getting into and mainly out of positions. And also, there are not that many shares that are covered that I usually have in my portfolio. So there is one method that I use, the derivative kicker, which is a pyramiding strategy that if I happen to own one of the shares that are heavily traded in the options market, rather than pyramiding into it using the physical, the actual share that I own, I will use an option to pyramid. So they're cheaper, they're usually fairly easy once you understand them, but they are complicated when you start. And it is something that you can have less of an investment for more leverage and more of a kick. So that is, I think, a strategy worth exploring. However, the Australian options market isn't one that I'd be suggesting for beginners.
God, no.
And the US options market, as we've covered on this show this year in particular, has been an exceptional place to be. So go back through some of the episodes, look for George Focus's episode on the US options market, and the UK options market as well might be worth investigating in terms of a FTSE call option over the top, because that thing's been going sideways for a very long time. But I won't go into specifics. Okay, so now we are up to trading psychology. Chris Tate, do you think it's overrated or underrated? Oh, we have got a series of 3 things being held up. So Chris Tate has gone down the middle, holding up both signs, and I've said underrated. Now, Chris, why did you divide your vote there?
I think what happens with trading psychology is that there are two separate issues at play. What happens is that people with no methodology blame their psychology for having no methodology and failing. And so they use that as an excuse to not build a system, a series of ideas that are testable and applicable to markets. At the other end of the spectrum, you have people who have a system that is testable, applicable and useful in the markets, but they can't apply it. So you have these two opposite ends of the spectrum. And I suppose you could, if you were to sort of push it a little bit further, you could argue that people who have not sat down and developed a method have poor psychology anyway. So there is that sort of, you get caught in a little bit of a paradox there. But unfortunately, it's used as an excuse by people who don't have a method and don't apply it, and people who have a method and don't apply it. So you have this duality that is problematic for people.
I've popped it as underrated because I think often when people start in the markets, they have no idea how much it is going to take a toll on their psyche. They think it'll be, if they follow the right system, what could go wrong? Now, that is often where most of us begin. But then if we have a loss or if we have a huge profit, that can actually really rattle us. We can feel it in our body. We can feel the adjustment in our heart rate. It's almost like we were under threat from a prehistoric creature. And in fact, we haven't evolved that far. As a trader, even though you're just looking at the screen, it is something where you can easily feel threatened. And this can put into play a number of cognitive biases. And these cognitive biases help you react illogically. So one of the favourite cognitive biases that I like is the arrival fallacy. I will be happy when. You think you'll be happy when you make your first $1 million. You have your first set of trades that go perfectly according to your trading plan. Beware of the arrival fallacy, because I think the idea is to try and be happy now. Do the best you can to create the environment where you are happy right now, rather than some mythical time in the future. And Chris, what's one of your favourite biases?
It is probably the narrative fallacy. It is the belief that if you have a story, that somehow the market is aware of your story and has the same story as you. What happens is all you've merely done, which is what financial journalists do, is they invent a post-dictive explanation for an original event they didn't understand. It's like my old favourite. The market went down today on profit taking. How do you know? Did you ask everybody? Did you ring up everybody who sold today and say, look, sport, why did you sell? Oh, profit taking, mate. It's simply a nonsense story. And we have this desperate desire to have a story, as opposed to the market went down today because it simply moved within the natural range of its volatility. Most people would go, well, it's pretty dull, and I don't understand it.
Okay, on to the next topic. Day trading. Is that overrated or underrated? I'm going to hold up my...
Is there another one I can put in front of this? That's very important.
We have both held up overrated. Now, day trading, if you could define it first, Chris, and say why you...
Okay, there's probably two ways people interpret day trading. The first is that you open a position in the morning and you make certain that position is clear and closed by the end of the day. So you end the day square. You start the day square, end the day square. You may or may not take positions during the day. Some people have a slightly more liberal interpretation of that, whereby they will start a position in a particular morning and they may carry overnight, although that's a little bit rare for people with this sort of mindset. If we go a little bit further, one of the problems we have now with trading is that there is so much nonsense on social media, and people think the way you start trading is by day trading, because there is also this silly notion that it somehow generates less risk for the individual and that somehow it is easier. It's not. And it's not, because the moment you compress timeframes, you actually expand out the emotional impact of all decisions made during that shortened time frame. People tend to make very silly decisions when their time frame is compressed and they panic. There's also no capacity to pause and reflect and assess, because you're so busy trying to do the business that you completely disregard this notion of looking at what you're doing and taking stock of it. And there's also my final favourite piece of idiocy is people who go, you just need to make 1% a day. Well, if it was that easy, people would.
Absolutely. And what about learning on the job with trading? Pop up your sign, Christopher. We are both going overrated. Now, overrated because in this game, you can lose a lot of money. If somebody's paying you to learn because you've got a salaried position and you're learning on the job there, lucky you. But with this, there is no free ride. It is up to you to educate yourself, to really grasp the principles before you put a cent of money into the markets, and to make sure you have a written trading plan.
Although there is a slight element of, if we expand the definition out, there is a slight element of learning on the job because trading is an apprenticeship. But you can't quit your job and then start your apprenticeship. You actually have to have a buffer somewhere in between that enables you to get most of the damage out of your system before you begin your apprenticeship in true. If you simply quit your job on Friday and then decide that you're going to start day trading on Monday, I don't think it's going to go the way you think it's going to go or the way you've been told it's going to go by the internet.
So thanks for playing along. If you're playing with Talking Trading, our overrated, underrated game here. Now, to cash in and see what those other 3 overrated, underrated areas are, you need to register for priority notification for our Next to Mentor program. Everybody who is involved in the mentor program just loves it because they get our personal attention. We don't farm this out to trainers. This is something Chris and I take incredibly seriously. We pop our entire life on hold so that we can teach you how to trade every market over every time frame and refine your trading plan. So make sure you register for tradinggame.com.au/priority in order to get onto that special list, because we are releasing information right now as a little mini masterclass with trading to everybody registered, because we know you are serious about your future as a trader. Any parting words for the Talking Trading people?
There is one thing I will add. I want to come back to this notion of trading being a job. Too often people treat trading as a hobby. In very blunt terms, a hobby is something you pay to do. A business is something that pays you. And I think people lose sight of that within the entertainment value of trading, which brings us back to this notion of day trading. In these wonderful questionnaires that psychologists build, where they ask a question without you knowing what the question is, it turns out that in summary, if you say to a group of traders, would you prefer to trade 100 times and make 20% or trade 20 times and make 100%, they opt for the former. They want the entertainment value of trading. They want to be amused. They want to feel they're part of the action. Making money is secondary, and it's all too easy for people to fall into that trap. You always have to default back to this notion of asking yourself the question, when you're trading and when you're doing anything involved in trading, is this going to make me more money? If the answer is no, then you stop doing it.
I love it. Chris Tate, you are a fountain of wisdom. And everybody out in Talking Trading Land, he always makes me laugh. Everybody out there in Talking Trading Land, just remember that we are providing this information for you for free because we care about you and we care about your financial future. We want to bring you the best possible resources so that you can improve your lot in life through trading the markets. So we would love it if you could refer a friend, subscribe on tradinggame.com.au for our free trading pack called Trading Made Simple. Just register your details there and I'll send you our free trading plan template. But also make sure you visit our website, talkingtrading.com.au. Make sure you're subscribed there to catch up with us every single week when we release these resources for you. I'll send you an email to tell you when the next show is ready. So, Christopher Tate, it has just been lovely talking about overrated and underrated with you. And I'm looking to continue this into the people subscribed to priority notification so you can hear our top 3 overrated, underrated. Bye for now.
Bye.